morning. Again, thank you all for joining us for our weekly update, our virtual Capital Connection of what's going on in Tallahassee. Welcome to week 8. Things are moving fast and furious. A lot of discussions over budget of the weekend. We'll get into some nitty-gritty stuff, but I do see that we have some people that haven't been on the call before. So want to explain a little bit of the housekeeping items. First and foremost, more than anything, we want to thank our supporters for this virtual Capital Connection series of Advent Health, Polk State College, with the support of Tampa Electric. As you all know, normally we travel in person up to session every year to meet with our legislators face-to-face. But this year we have launched this virtual Capital Connection series really to give all of our members an opportunity to hear what's going on a week-to-week basis, learn more about the process and how things filter their way through the legislature and come into law. So again, thank you so much to our sponsors, and thank you for all of you for attending today's session. So the agenda for today's call, we'll give a quick update on what happened last week and a look ahead to this week, and then a few federal updates, and we will open it up to Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box that you'll see on your screen, and I will try to grab those as I see them or at the end of the call. So feel free to drop those into the Q&A. And as I mentioned each week, we as a Chamber of Commerce and our Chamber Board of Directors do review the recommended legislative priority statement from our Government Affairs Committee and adopt that each year. And this is available on our website, or of course you can reach out to me at katie@winterhavenchamber.com if you would like your copy of that. So some of the stuff we talk about today is directly related to our legislative priority statement. And then some of the things are things that have popped up through session that I just want to make sure that our membership is aware of. And of course, if you are not familiar, here is our legislative delegation that are working on behalf of the Polk County community. So week 7 recap and the week ahead. So as I mentioned to you, COVID liability protection was the first bill that passed and was signed by the governor. This was several weeks ago, but it is something that allows for many businesses and small businesses, large businesses alike, to have a little bit of that weight lifted in terms of lawsuits or frivolous lawsuits related to whether an employee or a customer claims that they got COVID-19 at your place of business. So this raises the threshold of proof that's needed in many of those situations, and is certainly a kind of a safe harbor legislation for business. Main Street fairness. This is something we've talked about every week. This bill has morphed throughout session. It started off as an online sales tax reform that essentially codified into law that the seller or the retailer, online retailer, should be collecting the state taxes, not having the onus on the individual to claim and file the taxes that they should have been paying on their online purchases. It's not a new tax. It's a tax that has existed, but no one was necessarily paying. So, but what was interesting about this bill is as it went through, there were a lot of discussions about how that money would be spent. And they came together, and this is what they're calling the 3-for bill, the trifecta, as it helped to replenish the Unemployment Compensation Trust Fund. And that's what the revenues from this bill are earmarked for. And then any remaining revenues are being used to offset the business rent tax. That is a sales tax on commercial leases. Florida is the only state that has this. And so it's finally reducing down the rent tax from 5.5 to 2%. This has been on our agenda every year, pretty much since I've been at the Chamber of Commerce, and it's chipped away by a percentage point every year. But of course, that has already been passed and signed yesterday by the governor. Visit Florida marketing is also a priority of our Chamber of Commerce to ensure that the state is still marketing themselves as a tourist destination. And this comes up every year for debate as to whether Visit Florida should exist and what their funding should be. This year, there was some bill making headway that would essentially codify the existence, I should say, of Visit Florida. That bill doesn't look like it's going to make it across the finish line. However, as of right now, both the Senate and the House have fully funded Visit Florida at $50 million. And so we'll kind of see how that fleshes out. We're going to talk a little bit more about budget just in a moment or so. And then QTI legislation. I know we have a couple economic developers on the line. QTI was a qualified targeted industry incentive package for businesses that were coming to Florida. It's sunset. And so some sort of program is being requested or reauthorized. This was not making it through session and had more of an appetite on the Senate, not as much of an appetite on the House. Interestingly enough, when you think things are dead, the little bit of jujitsu happens and we can see things come back to life. So the Senate actually built this into their tax package. And so it's not dead yet. It's still up for discussion. So just a little recap of what is included in the tax package. The tax package right now, you'll see on the screen here, the House has included the tourist development tax used for sea level rise. This bill we've talked about for the last several weeks. I think it's 1429. I have another slide on it. The initial version of this bill would have taken and allowed the tourist development tax that counties collect, that is the bed tax, if you will, that you pay when you're staying in a community. Those dollars statutorily are supposed to be used to reinvest into the marketing of a community and the tourism and sports marketing infrastructure of a community. Year over year, there's been different types of legislation to try to raid those dollars to be used for either general funds, for police or fire, things of that nature. We didn't see the Senate side pick up on 1429, House Bill 1429. So it looks like it has been included in the House's tax package. One of the things from my understanding, and I will fully asterisk disqualify this, I've not had time since talking about this yesterday to go back and read the actual language of the House bill in terms of how the TDT is included in it. But from my understanding, it does not include what was a troubling element of 1429, which was that the tourist development tax would have to be reauthorized every several years by the voting public. And this is something that has existed for a very long time, and it would cost a lot of money, time and effort to ensure that it moves forward in its current form. So I believe that's been taken out of the tax package, but I do need to do more research on that from the 24 hours that I heard about that yesterday. And then you'll see in the House package as well, the back to school sales tax that we're all used for, the disaster preparedness or the hurricane sales tax holiday. And then they have also proposed, interestingly enough, a sales tax exemption for live events and event venues. So thinking about how those have been impacted through the COVID-19 and through the pandemic, we're seeing that as a discussion as part of the House package. And then the Senate package has some extensions. It has the back to schools and the disaster preparedness, which I think most Floridians are used to at this point. They're smaller tax packages than we're used to seeing year over year, but movement in those areas. So certainly some interesting things that we'll be watching through that. And as I mentioned, 1429 has been pared down, but included in their tax package. So the budget. You may have read some articles over the weekend about how both houses were in a lot of discussions over the weekend, and there are still some elements of those discussions that are not, they haven't come to terms with together. So essentially, as it sounds like those aren't agreeing, it will come to the budget chairs to have some discussions about that. And there are, as I've mentioned on the call, every week, some things that we're watching very closely in those budget packages that could have a very serious impact on Polk County. The House proposal, as I've mentioned to you in past weeks, is $97 billion. The Senate proposal is $95. The theme of the House package is resiliency. We've seen a lot of things come through that have to do primarily around sea level rise and road infrastructure and sewage infrastructure and things of that nature that we've seen come through. The budget projections, as they have over the past several months, have been a lot higher than what was originally projected the impact would be. And then the kind of wild card in all of this is the $10.2 billion from the American Rescue Plan that will be going down to the state. How that money is used is the question mark. The Senate plan does not include any of that money in their budget. The House plan, I believe, includes five billion in their budget, but how those might have changed over the weekend. A lot of the discussion on a conference call I was on yesterday about that 10.2 billion of the American Rescue Plan is how that might be used for affordable housing. The overall discussion amongst the legislature is to ensure that those monies are not allocated towards reoccurring expenses, that they are one-time expenses. So those typically would be infrastructure projects, affordable housing projects, things of that nature. The word on the street, if you will, is that a lot of people want to see a lion's share of that money go towards affordable housing, as we'll discuss later, because of what has happened with the Sadowski Fund over the course of this legislative session. One item that we have talked about week to week has been Polk State College funding. And as I have mentioned to you on previous calls, the Senate package and budget package was relatively strong on Polk State College funding. However, the House package, budget package, was at that point the potential of a $3.5 million cut. I do see that we are joined today by Dr. Angela Falconetti, the president of Polk State. Dr. Falconetti, if it's okay with you, I would like to promote you to panelist so that you can give us an update on what happened over the weekend and kind of what we can expect going forward. So I have elevated you to panelist, Madam President, and if you are able to, there you go. And if you are able to unmute yourself as well, and go ahead and give us an update if you don't mind. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
Oh, no, listen, I'm grateful. Thank you so much for asking, Katie, because as you know, this is our college in Winter Haven, but it's also our local Polk County largest college in the area. So, what we do is just completely important. You mentioned the resiliency component of the House budget. And as you shared, both the Senate and the House budgets, they were approved. The House budget, with regards to Polk State, has a $4.4 million recurring cut to our operational funding embedded within it, which would be detrimental to the college. The House budget has allocations or appropriations to all of the colleges, really, the Florida college system, going back to the individual colleges, who've received specific appropriations going back to 2016 through 2020. For us, that's an amount of approximately 4.4 million, as I just mentioned. So it's not just Polk State that's being impacted by this. There are other colleges that are being impacted. So again, the specific appropriations going back to 2016 all the way through 2020 are being pulled, and they're being spread across the Florida college system's tiered funding model. Now, that impact of 4.4 million on the House side, naturally, it's not approved. We have been, it's embedded within the budget, but as you said, there's still final steps as that are in front of us moving forward. And we have been coordinating, of course, with our Polk County legislative delegation, who are working diligently to ensure that our college's base budget remains whole, or as close to whole as possible. The college has also been operating under the impact of a 6% holdback of our entire budget that was instituted by Governor DeSantis following the legislative session last year, Katie, and we have been working diligently to make sure that our college remain whole. So again, the House budget is not looking as positive as we would like to see it for the college because of that $4.4 million potential cut to our institution, which again, if any of you are as concerned as I am, which I'm sure that you are, the main key is really to continue to advocate for the positive impact of Polk State on our community. And there is strength in numbers. I don't know that I'd call it strength this time, but there are other colleges across the state that are being impacted in this way also. However, the most important piece for me to communicate at this point is that we have hope. We know that our local delegation is good to our community and that they would not want to see this cut. The Senate budget really has a positive forecast for Polk State College. So we're fighting. And if there's any additional information that I can provide, please let me know. But I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that here because of those of you who just know the impact of our college, keep spreading the good word.
So Dr. Falconetti, I mean, 4.4 million sounds like a large amount of money. And in terms of how that could potentially impact, and I know we are eternal optimists, right? We are always going to think
Right.
about all of the positive things that will happen. But I know you're also very pragmatic in terms of running scenarios in your head and how certain things would impact. What kind of impacts could we potentially see if that money didn't come through on the budget?
Program closures. I mean, and so that would mean it would be devastating. You know, we work to meet the local workforce needs, as you're very well aware. I mean, all of our businesses that we collaborate with, but that's the bottom line. I mean, we'd have less student services, we'd have to downsize our academic and workforce programs. It would be devastating to our institution
Yeah,
and to
absolutely.
our community.
Absolutely. I mean, Polk State College is the workforce development arm of this community. From people degree seeking students, certainly, but you think about all the additional programs that you run, that you pivot on a dime, depending on what is coming into the community and what needs are. You know, you think about the collaborations you've had with the school district and getting teachers, with the hospitals and getting the needed nursing and staff that comes in there. That's what's so beautiful, if you will, about an institution so embedded in the community, is that you can pivot with what is happening in the community and on that day, that year, and then plan for the future going forward based off the trajectory of the community. So we don't want to stop the momentum, right? I mean, there's been so much
Absolutely not.
positive movement in what you all have been able to develop over the last 5-10 years, to see that impacted in this way. And so we'll continue to keep a close eye on this and work closely with Dr. Falconetti and her team to ensure that we keep Polk State at the forefront of all of our thoughts as this budget discussion goes forward. I also received an update this morning from our team at Advent Health. Just wanted to get an update on the different budget discussions that have gone through. As I mentioned to you last week, and I apologize, Rebecca could not be on the call today, but as I mentioned to you last week, there are cuts to hospital funding, and regardless of the type of hospital, in both budgets. And so as an update, as this morning, the Senate has restored much of the funding for the hospitals. But the House, they're still waiting for the House offer. So essentially, when the two budgets don't jive, it goes to the budget chairs to have those discussions and move those discussions forward. And so we'll continue to watch what happens with hospital funding. As I mentioned, the resiliency package, quote unquote, the resiliency package has been sent or has passed both the houses at this point. As of yesterday, it had not been sent to the governor. This is what you may hear people talk about in terms of pulling money from the Affordable Housing Fund or the Sadowski Fund. It is reserves, puts a ring fence around $200 million of that Sadowski fund, but pools, as you see, there are another roughly 112 million for combating sea level rise and providing wastewater grants and conversions of septic tanks to sewage and different types of wastewater grants that go in there. So it's unfortunate that the monies have been taken from affordable housing. But again, there's, I guess, a little bit of hope that maybe some of that American Rescue Plan will go through. Affordable housing is a top priority of just about every governmental entity, whether it's state, county, or city, and then how they can empower developers to create more affordable housing developments around the state. HB1. So this has not been one that we have talked about week to week in terms of a chamber legislative priority or things of that nature. But being that the governor was in Polk County yesterday for a press conference, I wanted to add it to our slide deck. This description here that you see on your screen is directly from the governor's press release in terms of how they are interpreting HB1 and its impact on the community. There are some provisions in here that do touch and border business discussions. In particular, if a city or county, whatever the jurisdiction is, government does not help to protect businesses if there happens to be violent rioting going on. If they're not having a good faith effort, there could be some lawsuits that businesses could then turn around and sue whatever governmental entity may have been in charge of that. That's really the business provision in there. This bill is controversial and was signed into law yesterday. And so we will continue to watch this. You can read a lot of opinion articles. I'm not going to get into that. But as I mentioned, this was something that, from my understanding, was worked on collaboratively with the Florida Sheriff's Association, of which Sheriff Grady Judd is heavily involved in. So just wanted to touch base on that, being that that is the second bill that's been signed into law by the governor through session, and it was signed in Polk County yesterday. Other things that I've mentioned to you throughout the time period, House Bill 699 and Senate Bill 1890. These are the bills that I've mentioned to you that have to do with trying to limit the amount that out-of-state dollars or single donors are able to get constitutional amendments onto our ballot. So for example, there in the last election cycle, there were several constitutional amendments that were primarily funded by one individual or one political action committee. So these bills, the whole purpose behind constitutional amendments or citizen-driven initiatives is that they should be citizen-driven. So this would allow or put limits on what the donation amounts could be to supporting and opposing a measure. And certainly there's lots of opinions on this one as well. Another bill that I didn't have a slide on, but I just wanted to mention to you, because I've mentioned about drop boxes and the efforts to limit or fully get rid of drop boxes for mail-in ballots. Baxley's bill, which initially was going to get rid of drop boxes altogether, that actually passed Senate rules this morning, but it's pared down a lot. It doesn't necessarily get rid of drop boxes. It just adds more regulation of the use of a drop box, on how you have to request a ballot every election cycle versus just signing up to always get mail-in ballots, things of that nature. So we'll continue to watch that. A companion bill has not made its way through the House, but again, there's jockeying that can be done. So just from a citizen standpoint, it's good to know what's going on with that. I know a lot of us used mail-in boxes last election cycle because of whether it be the pandemic or just the uncertainty of the year. Primarily, a lot of people used ballot boxes. So we'll continue to watch that as that goes forward. And then there are some people on the call very interested in property insurance reform, and our insurance rates have gone up exponentially. And so this bill, Senate Bill 76, was kind of the bill with the most reform, especially when it came to legal fees, which many people believe is a primary driver of our insurance rates going up. At this point, Senate Bill 76 has passed the Senate, but there's not movement on the House side. And then the House companion bill, House Bill 305, does not have the same reforms to attorney fees. So we're not sure where this is going to go. We're continuing to watch it. It's certainly the furthest ahead a lot of this discussion has had, but this has been a fight every single year. Last year, we made some good headway on assignment of benefits reform, which was essentially a method of driving up insurance cost by signing over your rights to an individual vendor, such as a roofing vendor. So there was some reforms passed on that last year. But again, this is one of those things that's been chipping away, but there was a big spike in insurance rate and homeowner insurance rates. And so looking at this is incredibly important to our economy. Other bills are watching, only updates from last week. The percentage of electoral votes required to approve an amendment is in rules today on the Senate side and added to House second reading. This would elevate the threshold from 60% to 66% for a constitutional amendment to pass. And then cottage food industry, that's an entrepreneurship bill we've been watching that would increase the threshold in terms of revenues, that could be, you could still be considered a cottage food industry, even if your revenues were a little bit higher. So we're watching that closely as an entrepreneurship bill. Beverage law, and this is the law that would extend some of the executive orders that allow for more flexibility on carry-out beverages. There is some caveats to this that I learned from the last week in terms of the type of license the restaurant has. If they have a catering license, they may not be included in this extension of the bill. Not sure if this was intentional or an oversight. I know I was working with Corey at the Lakeland Chamber and Ryan, their legislative director, in terms of filtering out. It's probably too late in session to make those corrections, but that could be something that we have to look at going forward. And then craft distilleries and being able to expand that industry. I look at this as an entrepreneurship bill as well. And both of these bills that I've just talked about, 329 and 737, have been laid on table in favor of discussing the Senate bill. So this is where we get to a lot of quick and fast and furious timing. The House is on 24 hours notice. The Senate is on 4 hours notice for bills to be added to agendas. Senate Rules today has a very long day and a very hefty agenda. Chad did text me this morning to let me know that he would not be on the call today because of the number of bills that Senator Stargell has in the Rules Committee today. As you know, bills go through the process and they kind of either end up in rules as a final committee stop or appropriations. And so a lot of bills are on the rules agenda for today. And then both the House and the Senate have scheduled sessions every single day this week. Are there any questions that have popped up in the agenda? I don't see anything in terms of state updates. And again, if you have anything that's come up, if you have any questions about the update that Dr. Falconetti has given today and how you might be able to help, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I would definitely appreciate that. In terms of federal, I don't have any updates for you in terms of the infrastructure package, except for its full core press in terms of the sales pitch for the infrastructure package. Interestingly enough, most people agree with what's in the package. Maybe not that all of it needs to be in one package. The big challenge on this one is the price tag and how they're going to pay for it. And in the business community perspective, there is a lot of very serious concern and opposition, frankly, in terms of how the proposal is paid for. And that is in corporate tax hikes. And you'll see that down at the bottom. So we'll see how this bill moves forward. But it's not that necessarily people disagree with the needs for infrastructure, for broadband, obviously all of those things that are in the package, but how they pay for it and whether it needs to be in such an enormous package are things that are definitely up for discussion right now. And then one thing I did want to highlight, was able to do a webinar last night for one of our chamber members, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women of Polk County, who has been a chamber member for a very long time, their group, and gave an update on COVID-19 resources. One of which, and I say this in case any of you know people in the restaurant industry, caterers, et cetera, I've been sending industry specific emails over the last month and a half to our restaurant folks, but just in case you have people outside of our chamber member network, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund is a very promising grant fund. It's about 26 to 28 billion dollars that is included in this package to be given as grants to our restaurants, caterers, bars, taverns, et cetera. The portal to apply is not open yet, but the SBA has put out all of the guidance. So it's sba.gov. It's right there on the COVID-19 resource page. And this package could be much needed relief to the hard hit restaurant industry. I'll tell you, the formula is pretty simple in terms of taking what they made in 2020 minus what they made in 2019 and applying for a grant for that amount. Although depending what type of restaurant or industry you're in, there are some different formulas that are applied to that, but it's relatively simple. The calculation of 2020 does include PPP or idle loans or things of that nature included in the income calculation, but just something I wanted to highlight. Many of you are familiar with the rest of the things on those lists, but I did want to highlight. And then there's still certainly a lot of discussion around not just the money that's going to the state, but the monies that's going to the counties and the individual municipalities and how those monies will be used, whether they will be used to supplement things that weren't able to be done because of county reductions in county budgets or state budgets, or whether there will be additional programs for consumers, individuals, or businesses to look at. So we're watching that closely, but don't have any information for you yet on that. So with that, I will stop my yapping and I will open it up for any questions that you might have on the call, or if anyone else needs to make any updates or announcements, just pop into the Q&A really quickly, and I will see if there's anything else that we should chat about this morning. I'll pause for just a second. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being on the call this morning. As I mentioned, if you missed anything, this will be popping up on our YouTube page today. And of course, I will keep you updated on the conversation about Polk State and what happens as the budget chairs get together to talk about the points where the two budgets don't match. We will watch that very closely. So we've made it to week 8, going into week 9, the final week of session, unless it is extended. And again, if you happen to be speaking to our legislative delegation, first and foremost, I know they love to hear from people locally, so do reach out. Let them know about the bills that you appreciate that they have voted on and they have passed. Let them know that, as they all do, it is speaking to the choir, but how important Polk State is to our community and the impact that it has. So if you happen to be speaking to a legislative delegation member this week, please certainly thank them for their support of our chamber initiatives, as well as your industry's initiatives as well. So with that, we will reconvene next week in week 9 on Tuesday. Thank you so much and have a fabulous day.